Sheriff, I think I just want to dig in a little bit on your testimony. I reviewed the written testimony that was submitted by all the witnesses, and a lot of you had written testimony, but then also a memo that was appended, essentially an appendice to your testimony.
Correct.
And I reviewed that appendice, and you suggest a lot of proposals, of ideas, of programs that I gather you believe would help us ameliorate, the emergency that's happening on our southern border. In digging through some of these, just for example, you list enhanced funding for regional communication and interoperability with local and law enforcement. I think that's something that all members of Congress would support. Democrats, Republicans, that's a common sense step that we ought to be funding. You list here continued funding and support for the Stone Garden program. And I don't know if you can talk a little bit about what the Stone Garden program is. I'm certainly aware of it. Some of my colleagues might not be. I know my colleagues from Texas are, but if you care to talk a little bit about that program, but a DHS program that you would like to see continued support for.
It's one of the only programs, Congressman, where Stone Garden actually brings partnership between CBP and sheriffs and local law enforcement, to include our state law enforcement. It's a program that sheriffs nationally and beyond have supported. It pays our overtime to include EREs, employer-related expenses, to work side by side with Border Patrol. It's a great program.
So here's why I bring that up. The Stone Garden program has been in existence for quite some time.
Yes.
Back during the administration of President Obama, it was at about $50 million, given the fiscal year. Right now, we're funding it at $90 million for the fiscal year 2023 budget that the president has submitted. That's the exact same number that former President Trump, submitted during the course of his presidency. And I guess why I offer that is because to me, these aren't partisan or, proposals that at the end of the day are focused on blaming one side or the other. This is an example of something that President Biden has continued to do to support, and I presume you support that he's continued funding for the Stone. Similarly, you put here one of the items in terms of a proposal that you'd like to implement is to hire more immigration and asylum hearing officers for all POEs, or Port of Entries, I presume that acronym. And I'm sure you're already aware of this, that on January 5th, so a few weeks ago, the president announced that there would be an increase of officers at the border to help process migrants. And that's in addition to the 25,000 officers. Obviously, we're waiting in terms of the president's budget to get the exact number, but I think that's something you support as well, I presume, in terms of adding more officers.
I do.
And the reason why I'm asking those questions, again, just to kind of land here at the end, is that from my perspective and from my constituents' perspectives in northern Colorado and in western Colorado, they are focused on solutions, trying to solve the problem. And you've outlined a couple of solutions here. And I'd love to be able to have a thoughtful conversation with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about these different prescriptive proposals and get to a place where we can find consensus. But unfortunately, at least as I've gathered from the parts of the hearing that I've heard, it's a lot of heat from some of my colleagues, unfortunately, about blame and sort of characterizing the problem instead of solving the problem. So I'm hoping that we can get to that. And with that, I'd like to yield my remaining time to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse.